Good morning. This is Rachna Singh here from Bina, Sagar, Madhya Pradesh. When it comes to my educational background, I have done my schooling from DV Pure Public School, Bina. After that, I did my graduation from Central University of Madhya Pradesh, that is Dr. Hari Singh Gaur University. Therein I did a 4-year integrated course, that is BSc BA from there. After that, when it comes to my teaching experience, I have taught for 2 years into the local institute. After that, I did 1 year of internship into the Kendriya Vidyalaya, and now I am teaching into Ojas Career Institute in Navsari. Okay, so today we are going to start a very interesting topic for you. You might have listened, like deep breathing is a very good exercise. Let us do it now, how we are feeling, okay? So, while doing deep breathing, you might have noticed that where this air was going, is there any organ into our body where this air was entering? Yes, yes or no? Yes, there is an organ which is present inside our body that is taking this air, is our respiratory system. So, in today's class, you have got to understand that what we are going to learn, that is our human respiratory system, okay? So, let us start with a very interesting topic, that is our human respiratory system. Okay, now we are going to study about the human respiratory system, but from where we were basically taking in the air, that was our nose. And can you see that our nose has a 2 opening? So these opening which is present into our nose is called as nostril. So let us understand this by drawing the diagram. This is my nose and it has a 2 external openings. So this external opening is called as external nostril, okay? Now, what will happen that these external nostril is basically entering here, okay, into, it is forming a cavity kind of thing inside, okay. So that cavity is called as nasal vestibule, okay. So that cavity is called as what? Nasal vestibule. So, inside the nose, have you seen there is a fine hair which is present? Yes. So, inside the wall of the nasal vestibule, we say that there is nostril as well as a sebaceous gland is present. So this nostril along with the sebaceous gland, what they do? They basically trap the dust particle. Whatever air we are breathing in, it obviously has a lot of pollutants into it. Okay, it also have a very particulate particles are basically present into that. So that might harm our respiratory system. No? So we have nasal vestibule which basically trap these dust particles. After nasal vestibule, can you find this bony structure which is present in between? What is this bony structure which is present there? That is our cartilage. Okay, so a cartilage is one that is separating our 2 nostrils. Okay, so what is the name of that cartilage? The name of that cartilage is our hyaline cartilage. Clear? That is called as our hyaline cartilage. Now, this is my nose. It has hyaline cartilage which is present there. Now, what happens? Now, as and when we move forward, we find that there is a passage kind of thing. Okay, so that passage which is present inside the nose, that is called as our nasal passage. Okay. So, this passage which is present here is called as nasal passage. Can you see this nasal passage is very long and it's spherical into the structure. Why it is long and spherical? How it will help us? It is long and spherical. So when we are saying that it is long and spherical, what will happen? The outside air which is present into our atmosphere, the temperature of that air is very different to that of our body temperature. So the air which is entering into our respiratory tract, that has to be equal into our body temperature. If the cold air would be entering, it would be definitely harming our respiratory system. So what happens? This long and spherical nasal passage, what they do? The air which is entering into our nasal passage, by the time it's reaching to our respiratory tract, what will happen? The temperature of that air will become equivalent to that of our body temperature. So this is our nasal passage, and this nasal passage again opens into a broader structure. That broader structure is known as our nasal chamber. Clear? This is known as our nasal chamber. Now, this nasal chamber further pass on and opens into a region which is a common passage of what? That is a common passage of food and air. So this is our oral cavity, okay, and from oral cavity, what we are taking from our mouth? We are taking food. What we are taking from our nose? That is our air. So there is a point where the air and the food, both of them are basically meeting here. So this common point, this common passage of the food and the air is called as pharynx, okay. So this common passage of food and air is called as pharynx. But when it comes to the pharynx, we are saying the part of pharynx which is lying here, which is lying in this part of the respiratory system, that is called as the nasopharynx. Okay, so the part of the pharynx which is lying into the nasal chamber, it's passing through the nasal passage, we say that part is called as our nasopharynx. So that part is known as our nasopharynx. Okay. Now what happens? Now our respiratory tract opens up into a opening. That opening is called as our glottis. Okay, so that opening is called as our glottis. So this is my opening. This opening is called as glottis, and this opening is guarded by a flap kind of structure. So the guarding which is done by this flap kind of structure, which is made up of cartilage, this guarding is called as our epiglottis. What? It is known as our epiglottis. So this is our flap kind of structure. Okay, so this flap kind of structure is called as our epiglottis. Here. Now we are saying we will further move down, and what will happen? We have a region that helps in the production of the voice. So this region which is helping in the production of the voice, that is called as our larynx. So this part is known as our larynx. Okay, so we can say that it is known as larynx, or it is also known as voice box. Clear? So this is the larynx, and which is also known as voice box. This voice box and larynx helps into the production of voice. Okay, now as and when we basically move down, what happens? This region of our respiratory tract, this region is known as, windpipe, okay, or it's also referred as trachea. So what is the role and the function of this windpipe? The function is to basically carry whatever the air that is coming into your respiratory tract, that will be carried by this windpipe and trachea. Clear? So this passage of the air will happen through the windpipe and trachea. And can you see a semicircular she-shaped structure that is present upon the windpipe and trachea? That semicircular she-shaped structure is known as ring of cartilage. Okay, this semicircular C-shaped structure is known as ring of cartilage. What is the function of this ring of cartilage, and why it is present here into the trachea? The function is that whenever the air is basically passing through this windpipe, what may happen, that as the air is entering through this windpipe, this pipe might get collapsed, okay, because the air is passing through this, and due to the pressure difference, it might get collapsed. So as to prevent the collapse of the windpipe, we say that this semicircular she-shaped ring kind of structure, which is made up of cartilage, is present into the windpipe. Okay. Now, what happens? This our windpipe and trachea. It at the level of the mid-thoracic vertebra. At the level of the mid-thoracic vertebra, and specifically quoting which vertebra, that is our fifth thoracic vertebra. This windpipe, this trachea, divides into the two parts. What are the parts? That is known as primary bronchi. Okay, each of these will be known as primary bronchi, and this primary bronchi will be entering into our lungs. Okay, so this is our lungs, and it is entering into my lungs. This primary bronchi will further subdivide into secondary bronchi. Okay, so it will divide into secondary bronchi. Secondary bronchi will further divide into tertiary bronchi, and this tertiary bronchi will further continue, okay, and will be forming our initial bronchulus. Okay, so this will be forming our initial bronchulus, and after that we have our terminal bronchulus. After terminal bronchulus, we have our respiratory bronchulus. Then we have a duct kind of region is present. At the end, we have a duct kind of region is present. That duct kind of region is called as our alveolar duct. Okay, so that is called as our alveolar duct. And at the end, we will be having a very thin walled, vascularized bag kind of structure. Vascularized means the blood vessels, it's form of the blood vessels. So this very thin walled, vascularized bag kind of structure is known as our alveoli. Clear? So this is known as our alveoli. Can we write what alveoli is looking like? Yeah, we can obviously write this. This is a very thin, first point. Secondly, it is very vascularized in the nature. Vascularized means it is basically made up of the blood vessels. Okay, thin, vascularized, that kind of structure. This alveoli is the region where actually the exchange of the gases is occurring. So we will say that the alveoli is the region where the exchange of what? Exchange of the gases. And what are the name of the gases? That is our oxygen and our CO2. So the exchange is happening at this level. Clear? Now, this was about our respiratory tract. Okay, can you see this ring of cartilage which is present here? Are they present up till the level of thoracic region only, or up till the level of the trachea only? No, they are further extended downwards, and it is continuing till the level of our initial bronchulus. So it is continuing at the level of the initial bronchulus. So this is the level up till which this ring of cartilage would be present. Okay, so we can say that the ring of cartilage is present up till the level of our initial bronchulus. Okay, can you see that these ring kind of structure which is present here, they are semicircular into the nature. They are semicircular into the nature. They are just present on the front side. What about the back side? What is present on the backside? Is there anything that is present on the backside? Yes. At the backside, there is a muscle that is called as tracularis muscle. What is the function of the tracularis muscle? As and when we do forceful inspiration. Let us do forceful inspiration and see what is the function of the tracularis muscle, which is present on the backside of a trachea, where the ring of the cartilage is not present, because as we know, this ring of cartilage is not a complete ring. Clear? So this tracularis muscle, what it's doing? It is basically expanding the trachea whenever we do the forceful inspiration. Let us try. So this is my forceful inspiration that I have done. Okay. So when I was doing the forceful inspiration, my windpipe was basically carrying a lot of amount of water, a lot of amount of air. So when it was carrying a lot of amount of air, what will happen? That our tracularis muscle will expand it and it will help into the passage of that air. Clear? So this was about our tracularis muscle. Now, when it comes to our lungs, are there any membrane which is present around the lungs? Yes, there is a membrane which is present around the lungs. There is a double bilayer membrane that is present. Okay. So it is a bilayer membrane which is present around the lung, and this bilayer membrane is known as pleural membrane. This bilayer membrane is known as our pleural membrane. Okay. And this pleural membrane has a fluid inside it. So the fluid which is present in between this pleural membrane, that fluid is known as our pleural fluid. Clear? So that fluid is known as our pleural fluid. This is the membrane. In between this, the fluid is present. This fluid is known as our pleural fluid. What is the role of this pleural fluid? This pleural fluid is basically acting as a shock absorber. What do we mean by term shock absorber? It means that whenever someone basically a kind of punches you onto your lungs, so what happens? Our visceral organ will get damaged. So in that case, what happens? This shock absorber or this fluid is basically reducing that force that is acting upon the visceral organ. So in a way, can we say that this pleural membrane is protecting our lungs? Okay, so this is protecting our lungs. So this was about our respiratory tract. Okay, when it comes to the respiratory tract, we say from the external nostril up till the level of the terminal bronchulus. This part of a respiratory tract is known as up till the level of the terminal bronchulus. Okay, and starting from the external nostril. This part of a respiratory tract is known as conducting zone. This is known as conducting zone. What is the function of the conducting zone? Conducting zone is one which is basically humidifies the air which is coming from outside. So what it will do? First thing, that it will humidifies the air which is coming from outside. Secondly, the temperature of the outside air, that may be also be different to that of our body temperature. So it also regulate the temperature, of air. So, and lastly, we can say that it is also carrying that air. So one of the role is that it is helping into the passage of air. Okay. Thirdly, we can say that it is helping into the passage of air. So this is the function of what? This is the function of our conducting zone. When it comes to the end, we say that this part from our terminal bronchulus up till the level of the alveoli, this part of our respiratory tract is known as our respiratory zone. Clear? So this is known as our respiratory zone. That's starting from the respiratory bronchulus and it is going till the level of our alveoli. So this is our respiratory zone. And what is the role of the respiratory zone? That this zone is basically helping into the exchange of the gases. So we will say that this respiratory zone is helping into the exchange of gases. Clear? When it comes to our lungs, where it is located? It is located into our thoracic cavity. Okay, so our lungs is placed into the thoracic cavity. When it comes to this thoracic cavity, we say that this thoracic cavity is airtight chamber. What do we mean by airtight chamber? That it is basically bounded from all the four sides, from the upper side, from the frontal side, back side, as well as from the lower side. Like from the front side, what is present? Our sternum and rib. From the lateral side, ribs are just present. On the back side, we have our vertebral column. From the down side, what we have? That is our diaphragm. So our thoracic, it is present into the thoracic cavity, and this thoracic cavity is basically a airtight chamber. Thoracic cavity is a airtight chamber. Airtight chamber, and here we can basically mention that from the front side we have our sternum and ribs. From the lateral side we just have our ribs. From the back side we have our vertebral column. So here we have our vertebral column, and from the lower side we have our diaphragm. Okay. So this was about the human respiratory system, where we basically studied each part of a respiratory tract, okay, and what are their functions. Okay. So in exams, what would be important for your exam purpose? They can ask, what is the role of the pharynx? We studied that the role of the pharynx is that it is the common passage of food and air. Why this semicircular C-shaped structure is present on this trachea? The semicircular C-shaped structure is present. It is basically preventing the collapse of the windpipe. What is the role of the pleural fluid? That can be the question. Okay. So these are the expected questions that can be asked from this section. And You can learn this thing, it's just that it is into the sequential order. You have to remember, like from where till which region the air is entering in what pattern. You have to remember that thing. Okay, so today we covered the human respiratory system. We will continue the next topic in the upcoming classes. For the time being, I'm basically signing off. Thank you.